If you ask 10 different people what Gray Zone Warfare is today, you'll probably get 10 completely different answers. Some people remember one of Steam's biggest launches of 2024, others remember crashing before they even finished their first mission. Some even remember one of the most immersive tactical shooters they've ever played, while others were dealing with the AI that seemed almost impossible to fight. The strange thing is, they're all talking about the exact same game. After covering Gray Zone Warfare for a while, I realized something. We've talked about updates, guides, AI, weapons, performance, and even you guys, the community. But we've never actually stepped back and asked, how did we get here? So if you guys want to see more episodes of this series, let me know by commenting down below and liking the video. Over the next few episodes, I want to go back to the beginning and tell the story of Gray Zone Warfare from launch until today using official announcements, community reactions, and the changes that shaped the game. And to do that, I will be starting with this video. Now, this isn't to prove a point, not to say the game succeeded, not to say the game failed, simply to understand what actually happened. So, let's go back to April of 2024. Before we can really understand Gray Zone Warfare, I think we need to talk about the studio behind it. Because this wasn't a brand new team trying to make their first game. Madfinger Games had already spent more than a decade building a reputation in the mobile gaming industry. The studio was founded in 2010 by veteran developers from the Czech Republic, many of whom had previously worked on well-known PC titles like Mafia, Hidden and Dangerous 2, and Viet Cong before deciding to strike out on their own. Their goal was pretty simple. They wanted to bring console quality experiences to mobile devices at a time when that idea sounded almost impossible. Their first breakout success came with Shadowgun in 2011. At the time, it wasn't just another mobile shooter, it was one of the best looking games you could play on a phone and helped show that mobile hardware was capable of much more than people expected. Then came Dead Trigger, followed by Dead Trigger 2. Both of which became some of the most recognizable zombie shooters on mobile and helped establish Madfinger as one of the biggest names in high-end mobile gaming. Over the following years, they expanded the Shadowgun universe with games like Shadowgun Dead Zone, Unkilled, Shadowgun Legends, and later Shadowgun War Games. Altogether, their mobile games would go on to reach more than 300 million downloads worldwide, giving the studio a huge audience and years of experience building action games. But despite that success, building games for mobile also came with its own challenges. Since these were online games, you can imagine the difficulties that came with balancing player experience and frustrations. Some projects eventually reached the end of their life cycle. And as the studio grew, it became clear that the kind of game they really wanted to build simply couldn't exist on mobile hardware. So, in 2023, Madfinger Games had a huge decision. They handed the management of their mobile catalog over to Deca Games, so the team could focus entirely on one new project. That project was Gray Zone Warfare, and looking back now, it wasn't just another release, it was the biggest gamble the studio had ever taken. In fact, Madfinger Games later revealed that heading into 2024, the company was running out of money, and Gray Zone Warfare needed to succeed. When it sold more than 1 million copies, they said it secured both the studio's financial future and the future of the game itself, which makes everything that happened after launch even more interesting. So after years of development, that wait was finally over. On April 30th, 2024, Gray Zone Warfare officially launched into early access on Steam. For Madfinger Games, this wasn't just another release, it was the biggest project the studio has ever worked on. They had spent years building a reputation in mobile gaming space, but this was something completely different. A full-scale tactical extraction shooter, built for PC, and one of the most demanding genres in gaming. And now, it was finally in the hands of the players. The response was immediate. Players from all over the world jumped into Lamang for the very first time. Creators flooded YouTube with first impressions, Twitch was full of streams, and social media quickly filled with clips of helicopter insertions, jungle firefights, and players trying to survive their first deployment. Then the numbers started coming in. Just 4 days after launch, Madfinger Games announced that Gray Zone Warfare had already sold more than 500,000 copies. That's an incredible milestone for any new IP, especially one launching directly into early access. But it didn't stop there. Less than a month later, that number had climbed to more than 900,000 copies sold, By the end of 2024, Madfinger Games would reveal that Grayzone Warfare had surpassed 1 million copies sold, with roughly 1.5 million total units when upgraded editions were included. For a studio making the jump from mobile to PC, those numbers represented far more than commercial success. The player count told a similar story. On May 5th, 2024, just a few days after release, Grayzone Warfare reached an all-time Steam peak of 72,548 concurrent players according to SteamDB. That placed it among Steam's biggest launches of the year, and instantly put the game on the radar of players well outside the extraction shooter community. Looking back today, it's easy to focus on everything that came afterwards. The updates, the criticism, the roadmap changes, and everything else that became part of the game's story. But I think it's important to stop here for a second, because history has a funny way of changing how we remember things. If you only joined the community recently, you might assume Grayzone Warfare struggled from day one, but that's not what happened. The launch wasn't quiet, it wasn't ignored, it wasn't a niche release, it was one of the biggest early access launches on Steam that year. Of course, numbers only tell part of the story, because while hundreds of thousands of players were discovering Lamang, they were also forming their first impressions, and those first impressions would shape the conversation around Grayzone Warfare for months to come. At first, those impressions were exactly what many people had hoped for. Players praised the atmosphere, the sound design, the realistic weapon handling, the slower, more methodical pacing, and perhaps most importantly, capitalizing on another extraction shooter's issues. People were still feeling that Grayzone Warfare wasn't trying to copy another extraction shooter per se, it was trying to build its own identity, and that came over a course of a few updates after initial release. But as launch week continued, another conversation slowly began to grow. Performance, server stability, AI behavior, optimization, they weren't the only topics players were discussing, but they were becoming impossible to ignore. Steam reviews and Reddit discussions quickly filled with players sharing both incredible moments and frustrating experiences. What's important to remember is that these conversations existed alongside genuine praise. People loved the atmosphere, the sound design, the weapon handling, the feeling of moving through the jungle. Two very different stories were developing at the same time. One was about the incredible foundation Madfinger Games had built. The other was about the challenges of launching such an ambitious early access title. And that's where I think the story really begins, because what happens over the next few weeks would shape not only the future of Grayzone Warfare, but also the relationship between Madfinger Games and the community that just helped make their biggest launch ever. That's the story we're going to explore next. In episode 2, I'd like to look over what happened after launch, why community sentiment shifted so quickly, and how the developers responded. If you've been here since day one, I'd love to hear what you remember most about 0.1 launch. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.